Hey everyone, it's time for another edition of Beaver Banter.
Beaver Sports Talk lives here.
It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. That is Ian Rivers. Ian, like the banner says on the YouTube stream, which you can watch if you follow the Beaver Banter podcast on YouTube. You can watch the video form of this podcast. Let the playoffs begin. And here we go, whether it's men's basketball, whether it's women's hockey, whether it's the inevitable men's hockey playoffs that will start next weekend. We're in the heat of the winter sports playoff season.
Yeah, it's really ramping up, and now we're kind of at the top of the ramp. You have to take the leap of faith and hope that some of these teams can pick up a couple wins in their playoff games or series this weekend. Men's hockey, of course, I don't know if you said exactly this, but they do start a week after everybody else will start their playoff excursions, but that's good because it gives us a little bit more time to separate everything out and deal with it rather than having it all at once. You can kind of split hairs and pick your battles.
Yeah, give everybody their time here. Let's start off by giving the time to the men's basketball team. Their season came to an end for the regular season, and their playoff position, playoff chances, a little iffy here and there throughout the campaign, but Bemidji State was able to back in to the final playoff spot in the NSIC men's basketball tournament, which means they get a matchup on Wednesday night, and they got to go back down to St. Cloud State and take on the Huskies. That's a 7:30 p.m. tip-off for the opening round. Winner gets a matchup with Minnesota State at the Pentagon on Sunday. But first, let's go back and talk a little bit about their final two games of the season. And both of them, again, tough opponents, Minnesota Duluth and Concordia St. Paul. Concordia St. Paul's a top 25 team in Division II. You lose 100-86, and then you lose 87-55 on Saturday to end your season against Duluth. Both performances, again, a little less to be desired, but with some losses by other teams going in favor of the Beavers, they were able to secure that final playoff spot and get themselves into the tournament.
Yeah. You look at these two games in particular, not much to say about them. The Friday game against Concordia, it was a pretty even game. I mean, the Beavers just looked like they were a little bit outclassed against a top 25 opponent in the Golden Bears. And that's kind of what it ended up being. I mean, they shot pretty similar from the field. There was no really huge disparities in any stat category. I did watch a little bit of the game, and it was just like every time the Beavers would put together 4 or 6 points in a row, Concordia, I almost said Cal, thinking of the Bears, but
you
Concordia,
got Golden Bears in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Concordia would just answer. Are they the Golden Bears even, or are they just the Bears? Concordia.
Let me
Am
check
I thinking
that.
of this totally wrong? I think they might just be the Bears. Now that I'm saying that out loud.
They are the Golden Bears.
They are the Golden Bears. Okay. All right. So I'm not completely out of line here, but yeah, it just was. I mean, the only thing, like, maybe you can say that turnovers kind of did the Beavers in. They only had 10 though, which isn't like a terrible number. It's definitely higher than you want, but it's not like they had like 18 turnovers in the game or something. But compared to 4 for Concordia St. Paul, that definitely does hurt, especially when you only got 4 points off of those 4 turnovers. Concordia St. Paul was able to turn your 10 into 18 points. So it wasn't, like CJ said,
when you play a team like that, your margin for error is pretty tiny, and you gave them enough to where they could rip. Like, you gave them an inch, and Concordia St. Paul took it a mile in that aspect. And like you said, they played pretty close, but yeah, when all things are equal, they're just on paper, they're just a more talented unit, and that was just kind of able to push itself through on Friday night.
Yeah, a lot of offense in this game, 100-86. That's really high scoring, really, really high-paced game. But then you tab over and you go to Saturday's game, and it was a little bit uglier against Minnesota Duluth. Not a very good shooting night at all for the Beavers. 38% from the field, 30% from three-point range. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's definitely not what you're going to want to be able to win games, especially at this point of the season. A couple players in double-digit point scoring. You had Malang Athian with 10 and John Pekarich in this game with 11. Overall, you only had 15 points in the game. 55 points in the game. And that's definitely something that doesn't help you when Minnesota Duluth is shooting pretty well. So defensively, not a banner weekend, giving up 187 points through 2 games and then only scoring like 145 or so on your own. But yeah, like CJ said, they're in the tournament and they play a St. Cloud State team now who honestly, you don't want to get your hopes too high, but they've played a couple of close-ish games, especially the last one that they did play in Hollenbeck Hall just a few weeks ago was relatively close, and the Beavers just couldn't pull it out late. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We got to see how these two teams stack up against each other. I was kind of hoping, we were talking earlier today about the fact that this game we thought it was on Tuesday originally. And so we're like, oh, okay, cool. We were kind of planning our entire, week schedule around this game being on Tuesday. And then we're like, wait, no, isn't it on Wednesday? And if it was Tuesday, I honestly might have considered heading up to St. Cloud for that game, for a playoff game, be there at Hollenbeck Hall. Oh, I don't know if I just cut out there or not, but it is on Wednesday, unfortunately. So will not be attending that one, unfortunately, in person. But CJ, what are your thoughts on this first round playoff matchup for the Beavers?
Yeah, well, it's a Wednesday, and I maybe would be able to get there. I got a debate. St. Cloud's it's a closer drive for you, but it's not that far away for me. It's probably about an hour and a half. So decisions, I think. I got to go back and forth. It depends. But yeah, I mean, that'd be the thing about this game that intrigues me is, like you said, there are two teams that played each other pretty well. And I think overall, yes, St. Cloud State is the favorite to win this game. But if you look at just some things overall, like, this is very broad, but when you look at overall offense, St. Cloud State is ranked 8th in the NSIC. They average about 76 points a game. Bemidji State averages about 73 points a game offensively. They're 10th in the conference. Defensively is where things start to be a little bit more of a gap. St. Cloud State averages about 72 points allowed per game. That's 7th in the NSIC, whereas Bemidji State's at 11th with 76.6. So again, I think it will come down to some of the things like that. When you look at Bemidji State in terms of the margin, kind of the margin of defeat, margin of victory, Bemidji State's at a negative 3.7 on the season. St. Cloud State's at a 3.5 point margin, kind of to lead things off there. I think really what this game comes down to overall. So obviously those two teams are kind of close enough. When you look at the 3-ball, I think that really will kind of tell the story, because again, St. Cloud State and Bemidji State are not that far off in terms of their overall 3-point field goal percentage. Bemidji State is about a 34.5% from 3. St. Cloud State's 35%. Pretty close, within like margin of error, and they shoot about roughly the same throughout the season. When you look at the opponent 3-point field goal percentage, though, this is where some things start to, again, create the gap, whereas Bemidji State is towards the bottom of the conference in terms of allowing teams that outside shot. Bemidji State's opponents shoot 36% on average. St. Cloud State's shoot about 34%. St. Cloud State ranks 6th. Bemidji State ranks 12th overall. If you look on the season, though, here's the weird part. Bemidji State is actually 4th in the conference in the NSIC overall 3-pointer shot. They average making about 9 per game. But that's, again, with the amount of 3-pointers they actually shoot. They end up shooting, they've shot 251 in the season, which again ranks them 4th in the NSIC in terms of 3-pointer shots. St. Cloud State's down kind of closer to 9th. But again, the fact that Bemidji State is they've made a point to shoot more beyond the arc. And this is going to sound really rudimentary, Ian. This is going to sound really simple. If Bemidji State can find a way to make their threes, they're going to win.
Yeah, and keep in mind that 34.5% that they're shooting from the season is really weighed down. If you look at the last 10 games, I'm sure that there's probably not a way to do that on the website, but that's a really interesting thing in a lot of basketball statistics. It's just looking over the last 10 games, the Beavers have really shot well. We talked about it with Alex a few weeks ago, how they were shooting close to, if not over 40%. And in some of those instances, quite a ways over 40% in a lot of their games down that winning streak. And even not these games last weekend, which I think they were down a little bit again. But the 2 games they lost 2 weeks ago, they shot really well in those games from beyond the arc. They just weren't able to play consistent basketball like we talked about last week. So those stats are a little bit skewed. Bemidji State recently shooting a lot better than they started the season shooting. The one thing that I think is going to be a massive thing to watch for in this game is turnovers. Bemidji State currently last in the NSIC in turnover margin at a negative 3.9 per game, which is pretty bad. They do not generate a lot of turnovers is the problem. They don't turn the ball over a ton, and that's evident from their assist to turnover ratio, which is actually not good. Bad. It's 6th in the conference at a ratio of 1.23 per game because they do get a lot of assists, being such a spot-up shooting team that they are, that shoots quite a bit of threes. That typically leads into a lot more assists. And yeah, they don't turn the ball over a ton, kind of like we saw this weekend, CJ, against sorry, I'm kind of stumbling over my words right now, against Concordia St. Paul. They didn't generate a lot of turnovers. 10 turnovers isn't the worst in that we've seen. That's pretty average for this team, but they don't generate a lot on the other end. So if they can take care of the ball and shoot the 3-point shot with a high consistency in this game, they're going to have a pretty good chance to come out on top. And defensively is where you're probably going to run into more issues. That's when they've kind of struggled this year, is like we said this weekend. I mean, they gave up almost 200 points over 2 games. So there's a lot that goes into it. They do need to play a pretty good game to get back to the Pentagon. They are the 12 seed. St. Cloud State is the 5 seed. So there's a lot to do in this matchup. You're on the road. It's not a super far road trip. You could have been going to Wayne. You could have been going, not to Iowa anymore, but to Minot or something like that. That would have been a very feasible matchup that you could have pulled. So it's not a bad road trip, all things considered. And like we said, the beauty of basketball, it's not a series. It's one game. If you get hot at the right time, you can make a little run here. And hopefully we have a game to talk about in a few days against Minnesota State.
Right, exactly. Again, you talk about it. They could have went to Wayne. They could have went to USF. They could have went to Minot. They could have went to Winona. They could have went, there's a lot of places they could have went that would have been problematic for them. But St. Cloud State, and I say it as it's only like a 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive from Bemidji. It's not the end of the world. It's on a Wednesday evening. So you have it's not log jammed in over a weekend. You have a little bit of time here. That certainly helps. But yeah, you're right. I mean, turnovers are going to come down to this game. I think the 3-point shooting is going to come down in this game as well. Interesting stat, by the way, Ian, in terms of 3-point field goal percentage, John Pekarich is currently ranked 2nd in the NSIC, only behind Marcus Skeet of Concordia St. Paul, who is shooting 45.5% from 3. Pekarich is shooting 43% from beyond the arc, which is 2nd again in the conference in terms of field goal percentage among scorers. So it's going to be an interesting game. I think that this is a game Bemidji State can win. I don't think the disparity between Bemidji State and St. Cloud State, again, St. Cloud State has played better over the year, but I think in terms of in a one game, like you said, sample size, there's no reason to think Bemidji State is completely hopeless. There is a chance that they can have a good night, win this game, and then you get to the Pentagon, and then you're playing with house money. I think overall the biggest thing to look at for Bemidji State men's basketball, getting to the Pentagon is the goal. Get to the Pentagon, and this season is a success. Lose in the first round, And now all of a sudden it just feels like there was a lot of missed potential with it being Sutherland's senior year. And you had a few guys step up. You had Tate Olson take a leap. You had Pekarich take a leap, and a couple of these other guys. Like, I think if you can find a way to get to the Pentagon, and who knows what happens, you don't have to go on a run like the team a couple of years ago did. But I think just getting to the Pentagon, playing Mankato tough when you get down there is going to be a sign to at least say, hey, we are a nice team this year, and they can't take that away from us.
Yeah, absolutely. You just want to feel like you've taken something away from this season, a team that had pretty lofty expectations in the preseason, and it would not necessarily, it's hard to call it not a success. It's definitely not the season you wanted to have.
Right. And injuries got in the way of that and some things out of your control. It's not like the team completely underwhelmed. You had their best player was hurt for a lot of the early part of the season, and it just felt like they never got in rhythm. And that's neither here nor there. But at this point in the year, there's no excuses. You just got to win some games.
Right. Exactly. It's not March, but it might be madness. So we're going to hope
it'll be March if they win tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I guess by the time Sunday rolls around, if they can create one game of magic without March in the air, they might just be able to cling on to a Cinderella run yet. So we'll keep you guys posted on that game. That's Wednesday night in Hollenbeck Hall in St. Cloud. It's 7:30 p.m. Go Beavs. Hopefully we can pull off another upset and keep moving on.
Roll Beavs, though. Roll Beavs, though. Women's basketball, their season came to an end. They played number 12 Concordia St. Paul on Friday, lost 70-39, and then they lost to UMD 71-54. They unfortunately could not get the sweep over the Bulldogs like we were hoping they could. That's all right. They still finished the year 6-20, and in a year where, again, we talked about this was kind of a figure it out year. They needed to figure out some things about their team. They finished with the exact same record as a season ago. Last year, they were also 6-20. In the NSIC last year, they were 3-19. Looking at their record in conference play this year, they were 4-18. So to able to do a 1 win better in conference play than you did not. There's not a ton of huge takeaways other than, you had some young girls play. You kind of needed to figure out the future of the program. You got through this year, and now it's just going to keep grinding to the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's not much more to say about it, unfortunately. They were able to climb the NSIC standings by 1. They did finish 14th this year instead of 15th because of their win or 2. Did they sweep Augustana this year? I don't remember.
I believe
know they beat them just last weekend.
They swept Augustana, yeah.
They swept Augie. So with that sweep of Augie, both teams finishing at 4-18, they did end up with a 14th place position in the NSIC. And I guess that's a building block, if you want to keep moving up the standings every year. You went up one spot this year. Maybe next year you go up 2 spots and you snag that 12 seed, just like the men did this year. And then you go up 3 spots. And then, within half a decade, you're competing for NSIC championships. But yeah, just taking it one step at a time. And I think we learned a lot about a couple of players that are going to be solid building blocks for this team for a couple of years now. And hopefully we can see this program get back to kind of the heights that it was at. I don't think it was a national contender back a few years ago that we keep talking about. We're just going to keep reliving those glory days back on R&B. But right before COVID took everything away, we know this program can get to that point. So hopefully soon they can climb the ladder and get back there. Just got to keep hoping. You find a couple more pieces and to add into this roster. I don't think they're so far away. There was quite a few close losses this year that could very well be flipped next year. And then you're looking at, maybe double-digit wins. Who knows? So we'll see where it goes. But unfortunate that their season did not end with at least a playoff game. But, some things just aren't meant to be.
No, it didn't quite work out the way that they wanted. But like you said, yeah, they kind of had a chance this year to figure some things out, see some things they wanted. I think you had a nice year from Taryn Plash. And I think with her too, she led the team in points overall on the season, average about 10 per game. I think you kind of got to see from a few different players, like obviously Aaron Barrett, a senior, ended up leading the team or was like right behind her in points. And there's, Rachel Koenig also in that mix as well. And some of those players, again, Rachel Koning's coming back next year, but there's some players you are going to lose. But I think what it does kind of show is you do have some girls that you feel like, okay, we can put them in this spot here. We can put them in that spot there. It's not going to guarantee a whole ton of stuff for next year, but it's just, you have to kind of stack what you can year by year. And it feels like you have a couple building blocks that for the next couple of years, you can at least kind of rally the team around and figure things out from there. And that's really all you can hope for in a rebuilding year like this. And now it's just kind of turning the clock forward to the 25-26 season. And I know that they have some recruits that they really like. I know I believe Cass Lake Bina, they have a girl coming from there who they're very excited about. I know Alex mentioned that on the program a few weeks ago. So they have some recruits coming in. They just, again, you just have to get them in here, get them together, and hope for the best. And we'll see what happens for next year. But until then, good season, ladies, and we'll regroup kind of next November as we get ready for that. It's crazy to believe that we're already wrapping up the women's basketball season.
I know. Every year it feels like we're always talking about, oh my gosh, women's hockey always seems to be the first one that just starts randomly at like the end of September or something, or early October. And then all of a sudden you're in November and you're talking about it, and the whole holiday season just flies past you. And now you're in the meat and potatoes of the schedule, and all of a sudden it's gone as quickly as it appeared. So yeah, another women's basketball season down. And hopefully next year we have some more success.
Moving forward to the women's hockey season, their regular season came to a close. They lost by identical scores of 6-1 on Friday and Saturday against Wisconsin at the Sanford Center. And now they're going to turn around and play Wisconsin again, the number one team in women's hockey. They're going to go to Madison to begin the WCHA quarterfinals, and that is going to be in Madison. And obviously Wisconsin's the number one team in the conference. They're the number one team in the country. It's a tall task to expect to pull off an upset here. But Ian, what are kind of the expectations for the women's hockey team as they go into what could very well be their final series of the season?
Well, you're always going to hope that they can pull off 2 games here and win 2 games against the number one team in the country. But if you're looking for more, like a more reasonable expectation or something to ask of this team going up against number one on the road, I would just look for any improvement. It's going to be a playoff game, so maybe Wisconsin's playing a little bit tighter. Look at that aggregate score of 12-2 over the last weekend and try and beat that. Hopefully you can put a few more goals in and you can maybe lose a game 5-3 or, literally anything. It's really hard to ask. It sounds like almost insulting to say like, oh, just lose better. Like, but we're dealing with the number one team
Madison back late October, and they lost 0-4 and 0-6. So there was minimal, at least in terms of goal scoring, improvement in that series. And like you said, it sounds ridiculous, but building even a little bit does help.
Right. And it's Wisconsin, like this is the powerhouse of women's hockey at its finest. And it's really hard to sit here and say like, yeah, I mean, we can go in and there is certainly something to say about like, oh, well, if we get in and we score early and put some pressure on them, then maybe we can come out with a good result in this game. That's exactly what you did on Saturday, though, by the way. You took a 1-0 lead into the second period against the number one team in the country, courtesy of Rayleigh Carney, and then they proceeded to score 6 goals unanswered, including 3 on the power play, and you lost 6-1 for the second night in a row. So, yeah, just anything to take out of this series would be awesome. Force a game to overtime or, like, only give up a goal in one of the games and you lose 1-0. Like, anything that we can spin positively would be a sight to see from this series. And honestly, like, I think regardless of the outcome, this is still a pretty good first year for Coach Amber Frickland. It's definitely something you want to build on, but they're taking steps in the right direction. I think you see that over the course of this season. It's really tough to sit here and say like, oh, well, they only won 6 games. What do you expect? Well, they play in like the most dominant women's hockey conference like ever. Plus, they're a team that's kind of building from the ground up right now. And I think that there is definite pieces, just like with the women's hoops program. There's definite pieces in place. And I think they have a very inspiring coach in Amber Frickland that can get results in this business. And I'm excited. I'm really excited for next year and the future of this program, because I feel like there's a page being turned right now, and hopefully this series is kind of the start of it. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to say, all right, well, yeah, they didn't necessarily win this series against Wisconsin, but this is going to be a team that going into next season is maybe not to be taken so lightly.
Well, and here's the thing. You mentioned earlier about marginal increases. Last year, Bemidji State's women's hockey's goals for to goals allowed was 42 to 181. And we knew at the time that it was pretty brutal. But let's fast forward to this year, Ian. Again, keeping in mind the context of last season. This year's goals scored to goals allowed ratio is 56 to 134.
Much better.
Much like you're trimming off both edges a little bit. Again,
Still
it's nothing
like it sounds bad, but like you said, without the context of last season, it sounds pretty bad. But yes, steps in the right direction. I don't know exactly how many wins they had last year in conference.
I believe it was roughly the same.
I know they have like one more win overall, but they have 11 points this year. They swept,
last year they had 10 points.
10 points. Hey, they have one more point. They got to overtime, one extra time. That's not nothing, I guess. But yeah, just in terms of how competitive the goals or the games were, that's a huge step in the right direction. When you look at that, it's still about 80 off, and hopefully someday we'll be able to see that be closer to even strength. But yeah, for now, I think it's a very good step in the right direction moving forward for this program. And I'm excited to see what the playoffs have in store. And after that, we'll look forward to the offseason, seeing how many of these girls stick around and want to build with this program.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it does feel like there's some energy here, some just the natural thing that comes with a new coach in the building, just some new energy and some new things going on. And for Coach Fricklin and company, it's, again, you're not going to write home about it, but I think you have to set the floor somewhere. And I think the fact that their floor or what they're setting is higher than what last year's was already, I think is just a good sign that, like, okay, we're moving. You would give them a pass if things were the same, if not a little bit worse. You'd be like, oh, it's the first year. They got to start somewhere. They got to whatever. The fact that you already started just a little bit better than the year before is just a good sign, knowing that it's just year one and you can build forward from there. Looking now to men's hockey, let's flip this over and we'll kind of spend the rest of the show talking about them. Darn it, Ian, every single time it felt like, okay, I was ready to mentally prepare myself for this team to just kind of like a couple of years ago, just kind of fade away and get bounced and be done and mentally move on from a year that's been pretty tough since about late November. And then all of a sudden, it's as soon as I close them out, they suck me right back in. And that's Bemidji State men's hockey. They played a great series over the weekend, Ian, and were able to get the sweep, albeit they had to get Saturdays in overtime, but it doesn't matter. They take away the majority of points this weekend against Bowling Green, and all of a sudden, Ian, it feels like Saratori's got them playing their best at the right time.
Yeah, it really does. We talk about it with almost any sport. If you're playing your best hockey, football, basketball, whenever you hit the playoffs, that's exactly when you want to be playing at your peak. And this Beaver team is like the pinnacle of that argument right now. We haven't yet seen it turn into that playoff success that we're hoping a couple weeks from now we can talk about, maybe a first round upset or something. But they have gotten 10 points out of 12 from their last two weekends. And honestly, getting that goal, you look at a couple seasons ago when we had that, what felt like a pretty disappointing season with all those points dropped at the end of games, and it ended up costing us home ice in the first round because we blew so many leads in the last 2 minutes. We never, ever, in that season, actually took points away from other teams. It didn't feel like. It was always us leading and then giving up the lead or tied with them and then losing in the last 2 minutes of the game. This season, we are the team that is, yes, to Michigan Tech, given up 2 points on the season because of late goals scored in those games. But we've now have 4 extra attacker goals taking points off of Bowling Green. You want to talk about stolen points. We stole 2 points on Saturday. And it doesn't feel like you absolutely stole them as much as it did maybe that Saturday game in Bowling Green, because I think we played better in this game than we did on that Saturday in Bowling Green. And it just wasn't coming. Not to fast forward through Friday, but man, you kind of got goalied on Saturday. I don't want to say that they like put 57 shots on net and Cole Moore stopped every one of them, but Cole Moore played really well in that game. And it just felt like every time the Beavers got a really good chance, he was up to the task of stopping it. And it took a little bit of, you can call it fluky, you can call it whatever you want, but Jackson Jutting just doing work around the front of the net and barely getting that thing in before it got poked, or I'm sorry, like battering rammed off of its hinges by Adam Flamang getting shoved by a Bowling Green player into it. But yeah, as you look at the weekend as a whole, it's a pretty good success because they kind of kept up that good offense that we wanted to see them keep up. I know they only had 5 goals on the weekend. That's nothing compared to the 11 they had last weekend against Michigan Tech. But 3 goals is pretty good. If you can score 3 goals in a game, especially when you have a defense that plays typically pretty sound fundamentally, like the Beavers do, you're probably going to be in most games at the very least. The next game, they only scored 2, but I think the offense was still there. They still looked like they were playing well on offense.
The process was there, even if the results weren't.
Yeah, like I was fully preparing. I was like a writer, right? There's like 2 minutes left in the game. We're down 1-0. I'm like, all right, I know what I'm going to say on the podcast. And like, honestly, Saturday's game against Bowling Green was exactly what Tom Serratori thought those games against Ferris or whatever game. I can't remember if it was Friday or Saturday that he said, like, I think we played well. Like, we just didn't get the bounces to go our way. And I'm like, dude, I was there. I was at the game. I don't think we played well at all. We kind of got smoked by Ferris. Like, this Saturday game was like, all right, this is the game that Tom thought we played against Ferris. Like, we played well, and it's just unfortunate that none of ours ended up in the back of the net, and Bowling Green had an opportunity skate right past Matthias Scholl and be wide open on a stick. But yeah, goal scorers on the weekend, Noah Quinn keeping up the power play success for the Beavers, assisted by Eric Martin and Riley Funk. Kirkland Irie got a tip. I think it was a tipped in goal. I could be totally wrong about that. I'm not remembering this goal at all for some reason. Midway through the second, Kirkland Irie from Riley Funk and Eric Martin getting their second assists of the weekend. And then on the power play in the third period, Jackson Jutting with the game-winning goal 2 times. Or I'm sorry, game-tying goal. He didn't win it in overtime. But yeah, Casper Magnuson, Issa Parekh. Issa Parekh, by the way, CCHA Defenseman of the Week for his performance this weekend. Congrats to him. And then, yeah, going to Saturday, I mean, it was just, like I said, my thoughts are all over the place because this was just these games against Bowling Green, man, they're fun. I would love to see this. I mean, unfortunately for us, it would probably be in Slater Ice Arena. There's a small chance that you would like maybe get the 4-5 if this maybe works out for you. Like, there's a small chance that you could host them in the first round, but this would be fun games. Like I said, we have 4 extra attacker goals against this team this year. Every game has been an absolute thrill ride. And I would love to see it. It would suck from the perspective that you'd be probably more than likely traveling out to Ohio to play a first round playoff series. But in terms of the entertainment on the ice, it's been good 4 times out of 4 this year for the Beavers and the Falcons. Jackson Jutting, of course, with the goal. 10.7 seconds left in the game. Call it controversial, but Bowling Green really couldn't challenge it. I mean, they could have, and they might have won, but they had already used their timeout. So if they challenge that and they lose, they go into overtime on the penalty kill. That's not ideal, especially when it would be a 4-on-3. There's so much open ice for a Bemidji State team whose power play is over 25% on the season, which is pretty good. You'd basically be essentially giving up the win to the Beavers, which they did anyway, courtesy of Adam Flamang. Of course, 3-on-3 is going to create some breakaways. I cannot remember who it was for the Falcons. Made a good move on the defender. I don't know whether he shot it wide or whether Scholl kind of poked it wide, but then Flamang was able to kind of sneak out and cherry pick a little bit, and the pass was onside. Flamang put it past Cole Moore for a 2-1 victory. What a way to win that game on Senior Day. And it's Matthias Scholl's second ever point on Senior Day. So he got an assist on that Adam Flamang goal, which was awesome. to see. So yeah, 5 points on the weekend. I couldn't be more over the moon because it just seemed like, man, this was going to be one of the most disappointing seasons for BSU, like in recent memory. Like it had not been going well at all. You'd been swept on home ice, twice in a row, and you hadn't had a win since Black Friday at home. That's a huge thing. Tom Serratori got his 400th win. I can't believe I buried that lead. Like there's so much that happened this weekend that was like a positive for this hockey team. And to carry 4 wins in a row now into Mankato next week is absolutely awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 400 for Coach Serratori obviously is good. I think the Beaver Radio Network broadcast said it best, and there's like only like 300 more to go to catch RH. Like that's all you got to catch him. You just only got to do this for about twice as long. So keep going, Coach Serratori. But yeah, no, I mean, I think they're like there's only like one other program in college hockey that has 2 coaches to have 400 wins in your program history or something like that, which is again, just a testament to the stability of Bemidji State hockey coaches. But
yeah, did you know, CJ, that they only have had 3 coaches all time?
Well, I mean, when RH was there, I mean, he was there for so long.
I know. I'm trying to pull up like the actual like list of coaches so I can see, because I believe one of them was there. Yeah, what the heck?
It's like the Pittsburgh Steelers, where it's like 3 head coaches takes you all the way back to like the 60s.
Yeah. So Wikipedia says they've had 7 coaches. So I don't know if like because they were NAIA for a while, right?
Right.
Early on. So maybe they don't count that. Maybe they're only counting like NCAA. But yeah, Mike Gibbons was a coach for 1 year, Bob Peters for 34, and Tom Serratori for 23. So yeah, that's incredible. I honestly, I knew that Peters had been there for a long time, and I know that Serratori's been here for a long time, but like I heard that earlier this season that he's actually only like the 3rd coach in the NCAA era or whatever. I'm like, wait, what? That's crazy. It's not like we're a new program either. Like you could say that about Penn State or something. It was only been a program since like 2012, but yeah, like Bemidji State. That's crazy. But yeah, congrats to Tom insane. With 401 now. So he's a little bit closer to RH. So
just patting it out for the next guy who, whenever he decides to hang it up, is going to coach there for another 30 years and have a chance to catch up. So yeah, no, it's cool to have that in the program, and it's cool for him. It's a big milestone, obviously. And I'm sure Jared had some good of the Bemidji Pioneer had some good quotes on it. I haven't had a chance to see him yet, but yeah, I mean, he'll say what he's going to say. He'll probably downplay it a little bit, but it's a cool milestone to get to have. And it felt like for a while there this season, I know that there were some people in the Beaver Banter Discord who kind of brought it up a little bit of like, is he going to get to 400 this year? Is that going to be a thing? Like, because everybody kind of felt like they should have hit that a little bit earlier this season based on how some things were going with the team in like, October, November. But the fact is they got it this year, and it's a really cool milestone for him.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as of a month ago, coming off of that Ferris State sweep, it was like, all right, are we going to get there? Because I think we said it, like, if we can't beat Ferris State, Northern Michigan at home, how are we going to turn around, go on the road to Houghton, and then come back home 2 weeks after that and play a Bowling Green team who's red hot and have success? But I think that this is just kind of, you get worried, right? We talked about this a little bit pre-show, where it's like, man, we're kind of, all right, I'll put my foot back in the pool. It's getting a little warmer in here. It's kind of fun. And I think the reason that we're buying in so much is because this team had those preseason expectations, and now like it just feels like they're living up to it. So it's not like this team was,
and they kind of did live up to it in the non-conference, right? Like they did they did put some good performances together. So
yeah, they had that stretch in November or whatever that they played really well. They split with Augustana. They split with, Minnesota State. They split with Minnesota. They beat and tied with North Dakota, and they took 5 points away from St. Thomas. Like that was a great stretch. And then they fell off completely for the next 2 months. And we're like, well, shoot, this is disappointing. And yeah, now it's like, all right, it's not like a team that was projected to finish 6th in the conference and they just won 4 straight games, like no disrespect to Lake Superior State, but like when they had that run early season, it's like, man, this is kind of just like the cycle with Lake State. They start off a little bit hot early in the season and everybody's like, oh, are the Lakers legit? And it's like, well, talk to me in 2 months when you guys are down in 7th in the,
They can't handle the
CCHA
grind of a CCHA schedule.
and, no hate to Lake Superior State, but they're currently in a tie with Ferris State, and they're losing that tie. So they would be the 8th seed if the tournament started today. So a long shot from where they were back in December when we played them, and they had a lot of top 4 hopefulness about them. But yeah.
I know this is a very off topic, but God dang it. Every time I look at the standings, I get really mad seeing Northern Michigan's 14 points and wondering how they got that high.
14. Yeah, well, 6 of them may have been against us. And I was going to make that argument for like, oh, the Beavers are so low in the standings. Technically, the 2 teams the Beavers have played only once, not including Minnesota State, who they will play this weekend twice for the second time. The 2 teams that they did not pull twice in the schedule this year, CJ, are at the bottom of the standings in Lake Superior State and Northern Michigan. And you can't even make that argument because out of a possible 12 points, you've only picked up 3 of them. So it's like you haven't even had success when you played against those teams. So do you want to play them again and not have more success? I don't know. It might just be a matchup thing, and Bemidji State wasn't playing that well when they played against Northern Michigan. But yeah, 14 for NMU. It's just not been a banner year for them for sure. But
no, it hasn't. But the thing is, like you said, I mean, there was a couple weeks ago, Ian, where it was pretty touch and go with Bemidji State's spot in the standings. It's like, okay, cool. We have a date of destiny to go to Mankato in the opening round and try and fight your way through that. And now you've kind of saved yourself to not have to play a Mankato or an Augustana team potentially.
Maybe,
some things can still change, but you've put your, especially because you're going to Mankato over the weekend. But like avoiding having to go to Mankato or Augustana for the opening round and have to win 2 out of 3 in either of those barns is kind of the goal out of this last weekend, correct?
Yeah, a little bit. And that's almost a perfect segue into I want to touch a little bit about seeding and where we might end up after this weekend is over, and use that to kind of transition into then a little bit of a preview against Minnesota State, who we will see over the weekend. The most likely scenario is probably that the Beavers are going on the road as a 6 or a 7 seed. The bad news is they pulled the Minnesota State Mavericks in Mankato for the last week of the season, and they are the McNaughton Cup champions again, which is maybe the worst thing that's ever happened to the universe ever, letting Mankato win something. So that stinks, right? They don't
deserve nice things. What is
But
happening?
It might be a blessing in disguise, right? Because they've locked up the McNaughton Cup. They've locked up the number 1 overall seed in the Mason Cup playoffs. They are 17th in pairwise, but given how the pairwise has kind of shaken up, there's a pretty sizable gap between them, and like the cutoff is probably at like 13 for at-large bids this year based off of how bad the CCHA is, Atlantic Hockey is, ECAC is, and that's not to mention if a team like Penn State, who's red hot right now, goes on a run and continues to beat teams and takes another one of those at-large spots away. So it's like a 1% chance right now, according to, I believe, CHN, that Minnesota State gets an at-large bid because they would probably have to sweep us, sweep the first round, win their semifinal, and then lose to like Augustana in the championship. And then they might have an ounce of a chance to get an at-large bid. More than likely, they're going to have to win the Mason Cup. So depending on what they want to do, they may end up resting some of their better players, Rhett Pitlick, Alex Tracy, who's been one of the best goaltenders, not only in the conference, but in the country this season, may end up getting rested in this game. He's played every single minute of competitive hockey for them this year. So, whether or not he's like, oh, no, I'm very passionate about playing every minute for this team this year, or whether or not they're like, we don't want to risk any type of injury to our best player on our team, which is our goalie. You're going to rest on Saturday. We'll give you Friday, but you are not playing on Saturday at home. Maybe they have a senior goaltender on their rosters. I have no idea. So that could be a benefit that helps you in Mankato. Plus, even if they're not, you play against Mankato really well, like historically. It's always a competitive game. We could be 0-30 right now, and I would still kind of believe like we could play them tough.
By the way, Ian, you want to know Bemidji State's last 10 matchups against Minnesota State? The Beavers are 7-3.
Yeah. And honestly, going into Saturday earlier this season, there was like a 200-minute stretch where the Beavers hadn't allowed a goal to Minnesota State, so they kind of do own the Mavericks. I'm not going to say that because, that's
going to get clipped.
That would be a horrible look going into this weekend and then getting 0 points out of it. But yeah.
By the way, last year when the team was in Mankato, Bemidji State split. They got a 7-6 win on the Saturday, and on the Friday it was a 5-1 loss. But I mean, they don't have a problem going down into the Mayo and winning.
So yeah, the most likely scenario, unfortunately, is that you're a 6 or a 7 seed. The 6 seed is probably the most likely. If you don't have a lot of success this weekend, Ferris State is only 2 points behind you, and they do play Northern Michigan. So if they can take care of business, you're probably going to need at least 3 points, if not 4. Like, there's a chance that you could take a split this weekend with Mankato, and if Ferris State sweeps, you're still the 7 seed. So that would be unfortunate. So we need the Wildcats to help us out a little bit, but do what you can. Anything you can get against Minnesota State. And that's another reason those 2 points were so massive on Saturday, just to give us a little bit of a buffer, especially over Lake State. And Lake State plays Bowling Green. Lake State has not been particularly good lately, so I don't really expect them to do much, but they could jump you as well. If they get 3 points and you come away with nothing, now you're the 8 seed again. I don't see that happening. I think Bowling Green probably takes care of business. The other scenario is you could end up with home ice. Technically. It's very unlikely. I really think it's a far shout. I will start to theorize if Bowling Green loses on Friday and if we beat Minnesota State, I will entertain it and go, all right, if Bowling Green loses again and we win again in regulation, then we still need other things to go your way, because you still need one of St. Thomas or Michigan Tech to get swept. And then I'm honestly not sure how the tiebreaker works in a 3-way tie between Michigan Tech, Bowling Green, and Bemidji State. One-on-one, we should have the tiebreaker with both of those teams, but I don't know how it combines when it's a 3-way tie. I don't know how that would work out. So we'll see. There's an outside chance that you get to play at the Sanford Center 2 weeks from now. I don't think I would count on that. I think it would be fun, but even to move up to the 5 seed, you probably need to get 5 or 6 points, and you would need St. Thomas to drop almost all of their points over the weekend too. It's probably not likely. A split would be awesome, because then at the very least you'd be playing good hockey. You'd probably at minimum lock up the 7 seed. The only team I really, really, really care to avoid in the first round is Minnesota State. Honestly, Sioux Falls, bring it. Augustana just got swept this weekend by Fairbanks. So, and granted,
by the way, they've never done a playoff series before.
Yeah, it would be a first playoff series for them. I think they're a bit overrated. It's hard to say that, but you did play a competitive series with them earlier this season when you were in Sioux Falls. It's a short-ish road trip. It's about the same to Houghton. It's not the end of the world if you have to go to Augustana, who is, by the way, I believe clinched in at the 2 seed. I did the math. I do believe it would be impossible for either Bowling Green or Michigan Tech to take it from them. And honestly, most of the series you're probably going to get, it's going to be one of Augustana, Bowling Green, Michigan Tech, who you've taken 5 points out of the last 2 weekends. One of those was on the road, so you could go do it again in Houghton. That'd be awesome. Or maybe St. Thomas. There's an outside chance that the Tommies jump up to I don't know. They could jump up to the 3, but they would need Bowling Green to drop points, and they would need to sweep Tech. So we'll see. It would be awesome. I would love it if we got a 4-5 matchup in St. Thomas even. That would be awesome.
That would be the play.
I'd go. We have a ton of fans that live down in the cities. Every time we play there, we have more fans there than they do, I swear. And I would be at that game. I don't care that I work next weekend. The games are at night. I work in the morning. I will make the commute to St. Paul on Friday and Saturday and Sunday if necessary.
Insert the graphic of Ian going, I will be there no matter what.
I will be there no matter what. But yeah, if this team can keep up the momentum and split, or even sweep a Minnesota State team who might be a little unmotivated. They've already won the cup. They probably want to give you, a little revenge for last year, or, they probably want to keep playing well themselves. I'm not saying they want to just like have a bye week completely, but if they want to keep players healthy, that would be fine with me, and allow us to kind of skate to 6 points and ensure ourselves at least a sixth place finish in the CCHA. And then, I mean, as long as you look competent over the weekend, you can go into the playoffs saying, I think there's a chance we make some noise.
Right. If you end the weekend going, hey, we were right there with the top team in the conference, we're going to be just fine, I think is basically the biggest thing. Yeah, you want to avoid having to go back down to Mankato. I know you play well against them, but let's not tempt fate here. Wait till it's in a one-game situation and not a best 2 out of 3. Augustana would be a fun one. You've played well in Houghton before. You won that series this year. Going down to Bowling Green is a house of horrors for you. I think I would avoid going down to
such a long road trip. Like,
and I think that's
the
why.
real thing.
I think that's why it's such a tough place to play, is that road trip is a slog. There's a reason why, like in the NFL, teams that travel multiple time zones lose those games more often than not, because it's, even though it's in a plane, the travel is annoying. And I think it's the same thing. One more thing too, by the way, looking at your tiebreakers. So if you go to the CCHA standings page, they do have tiebreaker situations when you're talking about how 2 or more teams tied for a CCHA, they go regular season championship, and they kind of talk about that. But they say when 2 or more teams are tied in the standings and they have played an equal number of home and away games between all tied teams, the seeding for the CCHA tournament shall be determined by the team with the greatest number of head-to-head regulation wins between all tied teams. If 2 or more teams did not play a balanced schedule, the criteria will not be used, and the following criteria will be used. If not determined by 1, the seeding for the CCHA tournament shall be determined by the team with the greatest number of regulation wins. Then it would go down to the winning percentage in all league games, and then it would go to total goals for and total goals against, and then it would be a comparison of the team's winning percentage tied in the standings within winning percentage against the remaining highest-ranked CCHA teams until the tie is broken or until all CCHA games have been considered. And then the seeding for the CCHA tournament would be determined by the flip of a coin if we couldn't figure it out by then.
Yeah, and that's simple. What I'm
it's that simple, folks.
A little bit annoyed with. Honestly, I think if you're going to use points to determine your standings. Now, granted, obviously they use points percentage this year, but for us right now, we don't have to worry about that. Nobody has to worry about that anymore because Augustana's done playing games and Augustana's locked.
They're locked into their spot. Yeah.
So now it goes by points again, essentially. And if you use points to determine tiebreak, like to determine the standings, why do you not use points against? Because Bemidji State, if you go by regulation wins, is tied with Michigan Tech with 1 over their 4 games. Bemidji State has 1 regulation win. Michigan Tech has 1 regulation win. Bemidji State took 7 of a possible 12 points, though, against Michigan Tech. They then should get the tiebreaker, in my opinion. Same with Bowling Green. Bowling Green has – actually, they have the tiebreaker over Bowling Green because Bowling Green does not have a regulation win against them, but they did take 8 of a possible 12 points against Bowling Green. So tiebreakers are – annoying, especially when it comes to 3-way ties. We probably won't see that be the case, but there is an odd scenario where both Michigan Tech gets swept and Bowling Green gets swept and you sweep Mankato, where all 3 of those teams end up on 40 points. Then you would kind of have all right, let's let Perry figure out how the standings figure in for the CCHA, and hopefully we get to stay in Bemidji. But yeah, that's men's hockey. Couple spring sports to touch on too before we head out of here. So
I will say one last thing before we talk about the Mankato series. There is one thing, kind of looking at the overall stats between these two teams, kind of found interesting. Obviously, Mankato, if you look at goals scored per game, they lead the conference with 91 goals scored all season long. Bemidji State has scored 83. When you look at goals allowed, they're also the best at it because they have won the most games. They've only allowed 49 goals on the season, whereas Bemidji State is 6th at 96. If you look kind of at all of that, kind of where is there an area where Bemidji State maybe would have a sliver of an advantage? I think you could look at obviously block shots, although Bemidji State second, Mankato is third. So they're right below each other within kind of range. The face-off winning percentage, Bemidji State is fifth in the conference with a face-off winning percentage of 48.4%. Mankato's 47.2. That's seventh in the conference, whereas Bemidji State is fifth. So there's one like area, and it's not like a majority area. And then, of course, Bemidji State's just done a good job if you look at the penalties, and their power play is slightly better than Mankato's with a 24.4% power play compared to Mankato's 21.2. That being said, Mankato has the best penalty kill in the conference with an 85% penalty kill, and Bemidji State seventh with a 73.4. So those are a few things to keep in mind as we go into that final weekend. Sorry, didn't mean to take up a ton of time, but those are a couple stats I wanted to
that's fine.
Throw the way. So
it's a big series, and it'll be fun to monitor. I really hope that we can come away with at least the 6 seed this weekend. So I'll be cheering for the Wildcats and for the Beavers. I'd love to go into Saturday just having some hope that we can keep climbing the standings. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's going to be a tight series. It always is when we play Mankato. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about that. A couple spring sport things to touch on, unless you have anything else to add about hockey. Softball did play over the weekend, as we said. They went 3-3. They lost their first 3 games of the weekend against Purdue University. Northwest, not the Purdue in Illinois. Well, they actually might be in Illinois. I don't
Purdue's
know.
Purdue's in Indiana.
Oh shit. Yeah, they are. They are. West Lafayette, Indiana. I forgot about that.
Lewis University, Purdue University of Indianapolis. That's a different one too.
Oh, yeah. And then Wayne State in Michigan. They lost all 3 of those teams, and then they came back and ended the weekend 3-0 against Roosevelt, Upper Iowa, and Hillsdale College. So they still set 500 on the season at 5-5. Another team, actually, CJ, that is 500 as well is the women's tennis program, who had a couple of wins over the weekend. They played Minnesota Duluth. They played them again, this time in Virginia, Minnesota. And after a 3-4 loss a couple of weeks ago in Duluth, they took the series 5-2 over the weekend with the Bulldogs. And then they came back the next day and beat another puppy team in the NSIC 4-3 in St. Cloud State. So they are 2-0 in NSIC play with a couple of wins over the weekend and 3-3 overall. So congrats to the tennis team for picking up a big sweep of the Dogs over the weekend.
Anytime you beat Duluth, gets a big shout out from us on this program. So
absolutely, yeah.
Congratulations there. Any other things, Ian, or are we good to wrap her up?
No, I think baseball might be trying to play this weekend again, but as we touched on, that's in Wisconsin. I know the weather around here
this week.
The weather around here has been nice, but there might still be some soup on the baseball fields. I don't know if they're actually going to play those or not, but they are Wednesday games. So as you're listening to this, it will be today, this afternoon, at noon and 3 o'clock, depending on when you're listening. If you listen in the evening, you might have already missed it, but yeah, hopefully baseball can get underway and get some at-bats in.
Exactly. Go to the website. You'll see if they've played or not by the time you're listening to this. All right. That's going to do it for us. If Bemidji State men's basketball wins, be on the lookout for us. We might, on Wednesday night, we might be throwing something out there to get you ready kind of for the Pentagon proper. But otherwise, just keep following the Beaver Banter socials. Keep following us on Discord. It's playoff hockey season next weekend, but always a good time to be in the Discord to smack talk Mankato. So it's important that you join and follow in there as well. For Beaver Banter, I'm CJ Baumgartner. That's Ian Rivers. Roll Beavs, and